In a crowded street, an arrogant officer thought he could humiliate an elderly black man without consequence. With a cruel slap, he tried to prove his power. But what he didn't know, the man he struck wasn't weak, wasn't helpless, and wasn't about to stay silent. In the next few minutes, a shocking twist unfolded that stunned everyone watching, and the officer learned a painful lesson he would never forget. If you were in the elderly man's shoes, slapped and humiliated in front of a crowd, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to avoid trouble, or would you stand your ground and fight back for respect? Tell us in the comments. Your answer might reveal more about you than you think. This is just the beginning of a story you won't forget. For more powerful stories that challenge hate and celebrate courage, subscribe to Rise Against Odds and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring video. It was a busy afternoon in the heart of the city. The streets were alive with chatter, vendors calling out, cars honking, children laughing in the distance. Among the crowd stood an elderly black man named Mr. Henry, a retired teacher known in his community for his wisdom and gentle nature. He carried himself with quiet dignity, walking with a steady pace despite his age. To those who knew him, he wasn't just an elder, he was a pillar of respect. But not everyone saw him that way. That afternoon, a young officer named Carter patrolled the street. He was new to the force, filled with arrogance, and often carried himself with the attitude that the badge gave him the right to look down on others. He noticed Mr. Henry standing by the curb, waiting patiently with his groceries. Carter's gaze hardened. To him, Mr. Henry was just another face to intimidate, someone easy to target. Approaching with heavy footsteps, Carter barked, "Move along, old man. Don't block the street." His voice was sharp, loud enough for others nearby to turn their heads. Mr. Henry lifted his eyes calmly. "Officer, I'm not blocking anyone. I'm just waiting for my ride." His voice was respectful, but firm, the kind of tone that carried wisdom behind every word. Carter didn't like that. He expected fear, not composure. A smirk spread across his face. "Don't talk back to me. People like you should know better." A few bystanders shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Some pulled out their phones, quietly recording. Mr. Henry sighed, softly. "Respect goes both ways, son. You should remember that." Those words struck a nerve. Carter's smirk twisted into anger. He stepped closer, towering over Mr. Henry, determined to make a spectacle. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Something ugly was about to unfold, and in the very next moment, Carter raised his hand. The sound of the slap echoed down the street, silencing everything. Gasps erupted as the elderly man staggered slightly but didn't fall. He stood tall, his eyes steady, his dignity unshaken. The crowd froze, and the real story was about to begin. The sound of that slap echoed, louder than the honking cars and busy chatter of the street. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The elderly man, Mr. Henry, stood tall, one hand lightly touching his cheek, his eyes locked on the officer who had just struck him. His dignity remained unshaken, even though the humiliation was undeniable. The crowd gasped, some whispering in disbelief. Phones were raised higher now, lenses pointed directly at Officer Carter. A mother pulled her child closer, as if shielding them from the ugliness unfolding. Others shook their heads, anger building in their expressions. Carter, however, felt emboldened. His chest puffed out with arrogance as he barked, "That's what happens when you don't respect authority." His words dripped with venom designed to humiliate. But Mr. Henry didn't cower. Instead, he straightened his back, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of decades of wisdom. "Young man, authority means nothing without respect. You wear a badge, but you've forgotten the duty that comes with it." The officer sneered, stepping even closer, his hand twitching as if ready to strike again. The crowd erupted with shouts now. "Leave him alone," someone yelled. "You can't do that," cried another. The once quiet observers were now turning into a wall of witnesses, their voices growing louder with each passing second. Still, Mr. Henry raised his palm gently, signaling for silence. His calm presence contrasted sharply with Carter's rage. Looking straight into the officer's eyes, he said, "Son, this moment will follow you longer than you think. Choose wisely what you do next." The words, steady and powerful, made Carter falter for just a second. But his pride, burning hotter than reason, pushed him forward. He wasn't ready to back down, not in front of this crowd. The tension was unbearable. The crowd leaned in, phones recording every second. Carter clenched his jaw, preparing to assert his dominance again. But what happened next would flip the entire situation upside down, and no one, not even Carter himself, could have seen it coming. The crowd waited, breaths held, as if the entire street hung in suspense. Officer Carter's fists clenched, his pride demanding he strike again. But before he could make another move, something unexpected happened. Mr. Henry stepped forward. His movement was slow, deliberate, but filled with strength that no one expected from a man his age. With his free hand, he calmly set his grocery bag down on the ground. Then, standing tall, he looked the officer dead in the eye. "You've mistaken my age for weakness," Henry said firmly, his voice echoing like thunder across the street. "But you're about to learn otherwise." Carter scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The crowd, sensing the shift, grew louder. Some cheered softly, others muttered, "He's not backing down." Phones were angled closer, ready to capture every second. Then, in one swift motion, Mr. Henry blocked Carter's arm as the officer tried to shove him. The movement was precise, controlled, the kind that came from years of training, not luck. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Carter staggered, stunned. What was that?" he stammered. Henry's eyes narrowed. "I may be old, but I've lived through battles you couldn't imagine. You think you're strong because of a badge and a uniform, but strength, true strength, comes from discipline." Without raising his voice, Henry moved again. When Carter tried to grab him, the elderly man shifted his weight, turning the officer's force against him. In seconds, Carter found himself stumbling, nearly losing his balance. The crowd roared in disbelief. Some shouted, "Teach him a lesson." Others clapped, unable to hide their excitement. For the first time, Carter looked uncertain. His confidence cracked, and behind the anger in his eyes was something new: fear. Henry, however, didn't strike back with fists. He simply stood firm, his calm presence more powerful than any punch. His message was clear. Respect could not be taken by force, but it could be demanded through dignity and strength. And the lesson had only just begun. The officer's face turned red, not just from anger, but from humiliation. How could a man twice his age, someone he thought was weak and defenseless, turn the tables so easily? Carter clenched his fists tighter, desperate to regain control of the situation. He lunged again, shouting, "You'll regret this, old man." But this time, Henry barely moved. With calm precision, he sidestepped, using Carter's own momentum against him. In an instant, the officer stumbled forward, crashing onto the pavement. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. Phones zoomed in as Carter scrambled to his feet, his pride crumbling faster than his composure. "Get back here," he barked, but the authority in his voice was gone. He no longer sounded like a man in control. He sounded desperate. Henry shook his head slowly, his expression almost sorrowful. "Your anger blinds you? Son, a uniform doesn't make you a man of honor. Your actions do." The crowd cheered louder, some chanting Henry's name, others yelling, "Shame!" at the officer. One bystander shouted, "Is this how you treat elders?" On camera, Another added, "Your badge won't save you now." Carter's eyes darted around nervously. He could see the cameras capturing his every mistake, his every humiliation. His career, his reputation, all of it was crumbling right there in the middle of the street. Still, his pride refused to let him walk away. He charged one last time, trying to grab Henry by the arm. But once again, Henry's movements were controlled, refined. With a simple twist, he had Carter's wrist locked, forcing the officer to drop to one knee in pain. The crowd exploded, their cheers echoing down the street like thunder. Some clapped, others whistled, but all of them knew they were witnessing something unforgettable. Carter winced, his face twisted with a mix of pain and shame. Meanwhile, Henry stood tall, his grip firm but not cruel, showing that true strength was never about brutality. It was about control. And the lesson for the arrogant officer was almost complete. Officer Carter knelt on the ground, his wrist trapped firmly in Mr. Henry's grip. The once arrogant officer now looked powerless, the weight of the crowd's judgment pressing down on him harder than Henry's hold ever could. Henry leaned closer, his voice calm, steady, and filled with authority that no badge could grant. Power without respect is nothing. You tried to humiliate me, but all you've done is humiliate yourself. The words cut deeper than any physical strike. Carter's eyes flickered with shame as he realized the truth. This wasn't just about a confrontation anymore. It was about his character, his choices, and the legacy he was leaving behind. Slowly, Henry released his grip, stepping back with dignity. Carter rubbed his wrist, too stunned to speak. The officer's arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only a man exposed in front of the very people he was sworn to protect. The crowd erupted into applause. Some shouted, "That's real strength." Others cried, "Respect your elders." The street pulsed with energy, every witness knowing they had seen justice in its purest form. Henry bent down, picked up his grocery bag, and straightened his jacket. Without raising his voice, he delivered one final message. "Remember this moment, son. Respect is earned by how you treat others, not by the power you think you hold." With that, he turned and began to walk away, each step echoing with quiet triumph. The crowd parted for him, clapping as he passed, their faces lit with admiration. Phones stayed lifted high, capturing every second of the moment that would surely go viral. Carter remained on one knee, humiliated not by force, but by wisdom. The image of the old man walking away, strong, dignified, undefeated, would haunt him far longer than the sting of a wrist lock. And for everyone who watched that day, the lesson was clear. True power comes not from intimidation, but from honor, restraint, and respect.